I'm here today with Jake Rauchbach. It's a pleasure to have you on today, Jake.
Solomon, thanks for having me. I'm excited for our conversation.
Yeah, it's the way I came across you, and it was via Instagram, was honestly pretty synchronistic itself. And we have a mutual connection with Tamir Goodman. And I remember I'd been interested in kind of taking all this different work that helped my own life and beginning to help other people with mindfulness and applying it to sports. And I wasn't sure if it was a real career path or a real job yet. The only other person I was familiar with that was doing something similar was George Mumford, because I'd read his book, The Mindful Athlete, and heard and followed his work about all the different things he'd helped with the Chicago Bulls. So when I came across, I think it was your Instagram page first via one of Tamir Goodman's posts, it was like, oh, wow, this is awesome. But I'd love to hear a little bit about yourself, how you really got into mindfulness and performance coaching, and where the love of basketball started, and then the interests in mindfulness and meditation, and where you began to first correlate, oh, this actually can help my performance and help other guys' performance.
Yeah, so I grew up in Chapel Hill, North Carolina, which is a crazy hotbed for college basketball. So that's where kind of my passion for basketball stems from. Grew up 5 minutes away from the Dean E. Smith Center, where Carolina plays. So it was hard not to fall in love with basketball and college basketball. And I actually grew up was coached by Dean Smith's son-in-law growing up when we were youngsters. So it was, there's a lot of interconnections growing up with basketball and in Chapel Hill. So yeah, so that's kind of where basketball passion for that comes from. I played all throughout childhood, played in college, and when I was a small child, I had a brain injury that affected me in many ways in terms of the physical and mental and emotional side. And so I had to find ways to help myself find relief, forget about trying to perform better, or play better, or shoot free throws better. I had to find a way to feel better and survive. So that's where the impetus for learning about mindfulness and different types of mental performance and mental skills and holistic methods comes from, is really my need to survive as a youngster and find relief. So I've been doing this for a long time. For me, things came to a head right around 15, 16 years old, where I had to really figure out basically the symptoms and the aftermath of the injury. It affected me all throughout childhood, but it came to a big time head 15, 16.
Yeah.
Had stress fractures in my feet, couldn't play basketball anymore. They wouldn't heal. It was really painful. And that's when I started to dive into different types of mindfulness methods. This is like 20 years ago, so it's a while ago. And back then it was, you had your George Mumfords, but you didn't have many of them. So it's been an exploration of self and techniques that actually work and help people and from a mind, body, and an emotional standpoint. And so that's kind of how I got into it. And from there, been working with kind of crack my own code to healing and figure out a way to feel better, and got back on the court. I was able to get back on the court in college, played and applied this work to my own game. And then from there, I've been working with athletes for about 10 years now, a little over 10 years with this work. And that's kind of my story in a nutshell.
How did you get introduced, especially at such a young age, into mindfulness and the whole holistic kind of methods of healing? Because it didn't seem like, at least 20 years ago, like you said, that it was very popular.
Well, when you have you've tried everything, almost everything from the traditional side, you're willing to do whatever it takes. Yeah. So there were books, there are several books I remember reading. There were, one was a Sedona method, which is a self-help method. It's a self-help mental and emotional method to release and let go of stuff that doesn't feel good, essentially. That was one of many different, I guess, gateway books and gateway avenues for me. There were also different types of chiropractors and holistic practitioners in my town, and I was forced to see those people because I had no other choice.
Yeah.
And then they had more inkling into this space than I did, and I learned from them, and so on and so forth.
It must have been very intense at such a young age, but I think we can all see how wonderful it shaped you and into what you're doing and serving others now.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
When it comes to having a program or and helping individuals or on a team basis, how, based on your own experiences and your healing, how do you really shape the program for each individual and the different like players that you've helped?
We take into consideration the players' needs and the coaches' needs, potentially the medical staff's observations if there's a injury involved, and we shape programs around how we can best move the dial for that player. So there's feedback and an information loop, ideally from player to coach, to potentially medical staff to me. So there's different variables, but when you break it all the way down, we want to do what's in the best interest of the player to really help that player get better, to be honest with you.
So what goes into, working with somebody? Like you're there on a sports basis, you ultimately want to help out, the individual and the team perform better. Like I was watching a couple of the testimonials, and was it at Temple or I think at your alma mater, Drexel, you were helping one of the point guards. I was hearing one of the coach talk about, but you help them you want to help ultimately their performance individually and for the team. And so when a coach or an individual approaches you, how do you go through, okay, well, let's assess what do you look at, how, like, beyond just the numbers of their game? You ask them, what their vision is, what their goals are, and really take that holistic approach, not just of an athletic basis, but also what's in their whole life.
Yeah, so we want to determine where their focus is, their goals, what their goals are, and how far they are away from attaining optimal focus and optimal goals. Those are two components that go into it. When you match that up with the measurables on the court, then there's usually interconnection. So you're looking to basically mesh out or synthesize and find the opening or find the gap where a player's not quite improving in a certain mental and emotional area. So you kind of combine all those. You set goals for the players set goals for themselves, along with the coaching staff, depending upon the situation. And you really look to train the mind in a way that that player can achieve those goals.
How do you introduce the mindfulness and performance and the meditation? I ask because I've begun helping a friend who plays ball, and it doesn't seem to stick as or grab an attention as much as hey let's go put up 500 shots. How do you introduce and actually get a player's interest into, hey, let's sit down and meditate for 20 minutes?
Yeah, great question. I mean, I don't when I meet someone, I never ever propose any work straight off the bat. Or very, very, I don't say ever, but very rarely. I think you need to build a relationship. At least the way it's worked best for me is you got to build relationships, whether it's a player, an entrepreneur, a salesman, a coach. You got to build the relationships first. They got to know that, you're a good dude and they trust you, and you actually have value, and you have their best interest at heart. That's most important. And once you're able to do that, then, the other stuff is easier to suggest. That other stuff just comes in a second nature. But Yeah, it's really all about building the relationships, because if you go into any situation with something that's, even if it's pretty commonplace, like let's get up, 500 shots. If you build the relationship first with the player, let's say, then they're going to be more apt to trust you and believe that what you're offering to them can help. So I think the first thing, most importantly, is build the relationship, build the trust, and from there, suggestions come easier.
I think that helps a lot. And then they're definitely be more open to seeing how something could help their performance.
True.
Wow. So what would you say is one of like the key parts of going through coaching with you, or that's something that really kind of, I want to say, wakes the player up? Like, you build a relationship, now you're beginning to introduce the thing. Is there some kind of point that you've noticed throughout the different players, or it could be unique, that when we get to this point, they're like, oh, for example, maybe somebody like myself as a player, when somebody would trash talk or something, you could like, there would be some level of like a reaction, but then maybe throughout the meditation you realize, oh, my thoughts create my reality, for an example, and whatever I think myself is very strong, so like I can push away whatever someone else is trying to throw at me. Is there any kind of realization point that seems to be occurrent?
Bottom line is different for every player, because every player has different buttons that need to be pushed in terms of kind of finding that sweet spot for that catalyst to really move the dial for them. For example, some players, it's making a varsity team. For some players, it's earning a scholarship. For some players, it's making the NBA, right? For some players, it's being the finals MVP somewhere, or in the NBA or somewhere else. So that the motivational piece is different for each person. And once you tap into that, there's more, generally more buy-in, more traction for that player to follow through on the work. Now, the other thing is consistency. Just like anything, this is not magic, and it's not rocket science, nor is it magic. Mm-hmm. But the greats of the greats in any endeavor, in any craft, did it 10,000, put their 10,000 hours. They put their 100,000 hours in. They put in a lot of time. They put in a lot of consistency and a lot of diligent work. So I think it's always important to understand as a practitioner, and I think for people going through the work to understand that this is not magic. You need to put your work in just like you would on the court or with lifting weights or whatever it might be. And if you do that, you're giving yourself a higher probability of really being successful in a bigger time way than you probably otherwise would have been by not incorporating this piece of the personal player development 360, if that makes sense.
Yeah. I'm curious what kind of, with the meditation and then the mindset, like what kind of key concepts are you trying to really kind of plant a seed or help the player see? Like, one of them could be going from kind of like a victim mindset or to more of a creator mindset, like a player who's really good per se, or has a lot of potential, but blames, playing time on a coach or some other things, and different external things. Is that one of like a main concept, or do you not really even deal with professional players going through different, limited mindset like that?
Yeah, I think different types of practitioners have different types of ways of describing the same sorts of things. Taking your example, like a victim mindset or a limited mindset or limiting beliefs or whatever you want to call it.
Yeah.
I think the first thing that's most important is you got to be aware of that stuff. You got to be aware of the limiting beliefs. You got to be aware of that you potentially have at times or experience some sort of limitation. that you probably are putting on yourself. You probably are putting on yourself because it's nobody else can put it on you but you.
Mm-hmm.
That's the first step. The second step is kind of essentially it's accepting that that's how it is, how it's been. Not that it's the truth, but these are patterns that you might have that are not the truth in real life, but you hold them and they hold you back, right? And the third step is the intervention to get in and start getting that stuff changed and moving from your example, a victim mindset or a limited mindset to an empowered mindset or to a powerful mindset or to a, to an optimized mindset. So, yeah, there are different things. You're looking for players to make shifts. You're looking to just like you would on the court. You mean just, through coaching primarily just skill sets, physical skill sets. You're trying to do the same thing through the mind. You're trying to help a player transition from limitation to no limitation as efficiently as possible.
Do you think a key part of that you work with the players on is looking at their identity and what their relationship with the sport is? Because I felt that when I got out of playing and playing professionally, competitively, and really began practicing more meditation, the game, I almost feel like, not in a negative way, but for comparison reasons, what it used to look like let's say a really cool car that you really want, and then perspective wise it began to, after I got really into meditation and my whole perspective of life kind of broadened, it looked like more of like a board game, and not in a negative way, but that it was no longer part of who I was. It became an expression of who I was. Like the game was not, and so that just relieved so much of pressure in performance wise, because then it was like an art form and not just intellectually. Is that something that you kind of can see and want to help the players?
Yeah, I mean, I think that happens a lot with players transitioning from high school to college or college to professional ranks, especially when you're in college and you've played your whole life and you're 22, 23, and then you leave college and you're not really going to play professionally, or you might get a cup of coffee overseas, or you might play for 6 months and you're done. The way your self-worth as athletes, a lot of times our self-worth, especially as younger guys and ladies, is wrapped up in our sport. So when you're no longer a basketball player, you're no longer a Division I, Division II, Division III professional basketball player, that can have a big time effect on how you feel about yourself if you allow it. You made a good point. As you mature, ideally, you want to kind of let that go and just know it's an expression of yourself and it's not you. It's something you do and you love to do. But if you have it, you don't have it, you're going to be okay. So, yeah, that's a big time thing. That's also a big time thing with players that are maybe played a lot and now they're not playing much, right? They used to be the starter, they used to be the man, quote unquote, and now they're not. They're not getting as many reps or volume on the court. That's also identity and shades of identity that go into performance, and those are all things that are important to be aware of as players and as coaches and practitioners working with players, because whenever you identify with something, solely identified as your self-worth, whether it's basketball or your looks or wealth or you name it. I mean, eventually you're giving yourself the chance to really self-destruct if you lose all your money, or you get older and your looks aren't the way they used to be. Like, so if you can get to a point where you're good either way, you're good if you're the richest man in the world, if you're living on the street, if you're the best basketball player in the world, if you stink, or if nobody wants to talk to you because you don't look good, or maybe you're the most attractive person, or any range in between, then you're going to win. You're going to win at life, because you're going to be okay with wherever you sit.
That's the zone.
Yeah.
Above the waters.
Very true. Very true.
I'd love to hear a little bit about the type of um, meditation or the mind. What are the actual practical exercises? Like, are you working with the guy while he's in a workout? So like I'm putting up shots and you're like, trying to get in the head, or is it a more of like a coaching session and you're just talking to the guy, kind of like this, and you're just getting to know him, building the relationship? What kind of goes on in that process?
Well, it varies. Sometimes as a practitioner, on a staff, so I'm embedded on a staff, and then you're there all the time. So you're doing it all, perceivably all the time to some degree, but not, hard.
Yeah.
You're just you have a presence all the time. When you're a consultant, generally you're not on the court as much. You're not in the team meetings as much. You're not around as much. So they come down to more of just, coaching sessions and stuff like that. Right. For the player, it's good to have a mixture of both, I think. I think, it's just like strength and conditioning, or watching film, let's say. You don't want, they're not different compartments in your game or your life. Like, everything's integrated together. So just because you lift weights 4 times a week, like, that's all part of your game too. Although you're not doing it on the court. You might be stretching before the game. You might be getting that stuff in. You might be watching film a couple days before the game, or the day before the game, or the day of. But all that stuff goes into your performance. And the same thing with mental performance. Everything should be integrated into the total player. I think that's really important. So it's not a standalone event. It's not a standalone skill sets. They should be integrated. And when they're integrated, generally the player has a chance to do better than they were doing.
What are the meditations like that you introduce to the players?
They vary. There's many different meditations that I use, and there's many different meditations that have been on the market for thousands of years. Right. This is like a core, a fundamental pillar of people.
Yeah, I guess my question is more like, are you recording them and gearing it more towards the sports? Because I'm aware there's many different types of meditation disciplines and practices. How do you kind of just take one of those, and then like one of the key components is visualization, and it used to be common for just athletes, and then people realize, like, one of the main meditation teachers and doctors whose work I like to practice is Dr. Joe Dispenza. And it's like, just like an athlete would visualize a performance, you can do that with your life, and you visualize and really embody a certain experience or event that you'd like to experience. And so do you grab something and share it with the players that's similar to that, and just have them adapt or use their athletic goals in that? Or is it specifically geared towards the sport?
Both. It's adaptable for the player in the sport, or it cannot be, because mental performance is mental performance. Although it is adaptable to the sport and to the player, when you break it down, it's very similar across all genres of performance. So say a player wants to settle before a game. They get too nervous. They get too anxious. Meditation, just focusing on breath is great. It's not a basketball specific or sports specific meditation per se, but it is a performance specific meditation. You can have the player focus on 10 deep breaths before the game. Allows them to kind of first of all refocus. It also allows their system to kind of relax, and that's a real simple meditation that's been around for, I'm sure, thousands of years, where you're literally just focusing on breath. And by focusing on breath, it brings you into the present moment, because the present moment is really where everything good happens in our life. There's no past, there's no future, there's only the present moment. So if you got a player in the past, meaning they're nervous because they had nervous experiences in the past. They're in the past. So bring them back to the present by have them one way is to have them focus on their breath. That also gets them out of their future and thinking about the game that's about to jump off in 15, 20, 30 minutes or whatever it might be. So that's just one example. I mean, but it all comes down to being present moment, as you know, Solomon, and it's so key. I mean, there have been books written about the present moment, and really meditation, that's what it's about, is bringing you into the present moment. And magical things can happen there, not only with performance, but other things in life too. So, yeah, that's kind of the gist of it.
Yeah. And it's really cool. It's even, they've done brain scans, even on brain scans, when somebody's thinking, in the past or in the future, the different parts of the brain light up very similar, and it's out. You can tell that the person's not very present. And it takes a lot of practice to really become more present, but you're right. And I was explaining this to a friend on a podcast, I think last week. A lot of us, myself included, when first getting into this mindfulness, it's become so popular and mainstream that it's immediate. Like I'll begin helping some individuals, and it's like, oh, it's hard for me. I can't be mindful, and so it's like really having to clarify what is mindfulness, what is being present. It's not just a woo-woo or a something out there. Like, it really kind of not just helps the performance on the court, but off the court. And just because, I remember even hearing Kobe Bryant talk about in a speech he gave to the San Diego Chargers, when he was like, did you ever hear that one?
I don't know if I have.
You have to stay in the moment as an athlete. Right? If I miss this shot here, I can't carry it over to the next shot. If people don't understand that concept, you look at the game and you're saying, okay, he has no conscience. He's just gunning and shooting. No, as an athlete, if you become conscious of your struggles, you're done. You're done. You have to forget about what just happened and stay right in the moment. I don't care if I miss 10, 20, 30 in a row. I have an open shot here. It's my responsibility to shoot this shot. Right? You have to stay in the moment.
I was wondering if you could speak to walk us through how you stay in the now.
It's a process. It's a serious process, and it's never perfect and never will be. I can tell you when I started the process. When I started the process, I was in high school, it was my sophomore year, in class, particularly geometry. I never paid attention. It's kind of my mind would drift, and I would think about other things. And then so we fast forward to a game, and we had a game, and we had a lead. We had a 1-point lead, and I'm thinking the game is getting better. Right? So I'm thinking about the celebration that's coming after. Right? And so the opposing team has a chance to tie. They take a shot. I can tell the shot's off. Right? So I'm following the flight of the ball. As I'm following the flight of the ball, distracted, my man cuts behind me, grabs the offensive rebound, puts it in, and loses it. Right? So then the next day when I'm sitting in class, my mind's wandering again, and I immediately make the connection of what's happening in this geometry class with what happened in the game. Right? So I took that as an opportunity to say, okay, this is really not about geometry for me. But it's about locking in and staying present in everything I do, because then I'm always training, I'm always practicing, I'm always preparing for the game. Right? So if I can stay focused on what this teacher is saying, if I can stay focused on the here and now and make that a habit, then that'll help me when I'm out there on the court.
He was talking about how when it first really clicked with him, he was in a high school game, or it was a high school game day, and he was in geometry class, and he was just thinking about the game. Like, he wasn't present. He wasn't in the class. Physically, he was in the class, but his attention was on the game. Mm-hmm. And then he talks about how then later in the game, they were about to win, but then his attention, like the guy, somebody shot the ball, and he assumed it was going to miss, and as the ball was going past him, he didn't box out the guy he was guarding, and the guy ends up grabbing the rebound, putting it up, and beating them. And he said in that moment, he realized the importance of being present, and how when he was in geometry class, for example, he shouldn't be thinking about basketball. He should be present in geometry class. And when I first heard that from him, I was like, that blows my mind, because growing up as an athlete, in the media, all the different things we're thrown at is, you know, don't never be satisfied, or eat, drink, sleep, basketball. And so I would take that like literally. So, you know, even though I did very well in classes, like, yeah, I would be thinking about the game, you know, in the future, or what happened in the past, that it was never really present. So
Yeah, no,
it is really cool how being really just present, and, you know, not thinking about something that hasn't happened yet or had happened in the past, really would improve how you progress.
absolutely. Well said. Well said. I mean, I think that's why guys like Kobe Bryant and Michael Jordan are who they are, because they became masters of their present moment. I mean,
Amazing.
I don't want to do their skills or their gifts a disservice, but I think, my opinion, their best asset is, and their best skill set is their ability to stay present and stay locked in and really let go of anything other than what they're focused on. Kobe and Michael, in my humble opinion, great athletes, great skill sets, physical skill sets, great on-court skill sets, but there are other players that have similar skill sets or similar athleticism to them. So what set them apart? There had to be a differentiating factor, right? It's not just like, boom, you're that guy. Like, maybe, but I mean, I think it still needs to be cultivated.
Yeah.
And I think what they did, the thing that they're a master of is being able to be locked in and live in their present moment, like Kobe talked about, even in geometry class, so that they're getting the most out of their moments of their life, right? So some of us are in different moments from the past to the future, but they're firmly in the present moment, which allows them to improve faster than everybody else and leverage everything that they were given in the first place.
It's truly amazing. I remember watching also the Last Dance documentary, and one of the guys also mentioned similar, that Michael's best gift or attribute was not playing on the game, but just his ability to be present.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking about. He was a writer, I think, of writer. He was a writer, right? Maybe he's a biography writer or something like that. Not sure.
Yeah. Well, when I was growing up playing games, and this is just kind of curiosity now talking, I would look at like different commentators, different people would assess how Kobe was just always working out like super hard, you know, the hardest worker kind of thing. But whenever I would look into him, I would realize that he's also practicing these different meditation and other things that would improve his mindset. What do you think? But then I wouldn't see that really in any other players. I'm just curious, like, what do you think it took a while for other players to kind of really get into that, or to really be open for it? Like, it seemed like they were just really pioneers in bringing it to basketball, along with Coach Phil Jackson.
Yeah, I think those guys would do whatever it took to get an edge, and I think they probably learned early on that they can get an edge by training their mind, where others were maybe a little bit more uncomfortable around that, or less willing to put themselves out there and take a risk. So that's how I kind of observe that, is they're willing to do whatever it takes, and they're ahead of their times. So they're savants. They were ahead of their times.
Well, Jake, it's been truly a pleasure being able to be introduced to you and now speak with you. You're doing a lot of similar work that I aspire to build and to help others in the sports realm. So thank you very much.
Solomon, it's a pleasure. I'm humbled and to have a chance to speak with you, and I'm grateful that you had me on today. Thanks for the conversation. It was fun.
Yeah, for sure. Final question is, somebody, a fellow athlete, high school, college, or pro, happens to be listening to this. What's a small little practical step, like maybe journaling or writing down something that you think would be excellent to start questioning and observing how they've been as an athlete and where they'd like to go?
Well, I think you nailed it. When you write things down, it ingrains it even more for yourself. So writing down where you want to go, framing it for yourself, making it as real lifelike as possible is the first step. And then I would offer to begin to observe as much as you can, especially the thoughts that you don't know that you have, because those are the thoughts that run the show. whether you know it or not. And really probably the only way to make big time change across any genre of life is to really take care and address those unseen patterns. And when you can kind of conquer those and optimize those, then the sky is the limit.
And that's where the meditation helps a lot.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Jake, such a pleasure. I hope to continue fostering this relationship and talking to you some more.
Likewise. That was a blast, man. I appreciate that.
Yeah, for sure.